I realized there are unique, outrageous acts of love that can be committed by me and me alone, and that is the unique purpose, obligation, joy, and responsibility. It's my ability to respond to reality. That's my outrageous act of love.
A planetary awakening in love through a unique self-symphony.
What a privilege it is to be part of this global community.
There's a voice within me that asks, who am I, right? Who am I in all of this?
Each and every one of us has a unique gift to give that we desperately need.
Welcome to the heart of the revolution, everyone. It is with deep joy that we are together today in one mountain, many paths. And thank you so much for that sacred singing with us, Krista, and thank you for the silence, everyone. Our mission is what Barbara Marx Hubbard and Dr. Mark Goffney call a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. We are activating a new humanity and awakening as a new species, Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. As a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, a zendo, no one is excluded, everyone is included, and we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse awakening within us. Welcome home, everyone. I am Christina Tahel, the co-executive producer, along with Jamie Long, Jacqueline Clark, and Krista Josepha, and we are so delighted to be together with each and every one of you today for week 327 of our live community broadcast. What a privilege it is to be part of a global community where we absolutely contribute to humanity's flourishing. Use the Zoom and the Facebook chat functions to say hello, to let us know where you're from, and to resonate the prayers and to speak the Dharma. It's the opposite, resonate the Dharma and speak your prayers. On Zoom, check that your chat settings say everyone so that we can all hear from you. Care to step deeper into community through the work and practice of creating the great Homo Amor, a library? What a fantastic opportunity this is. Help out by joining the Mystical Editing Society. Reach out to Krista, whose email is in the chat box right now. Friday, a couple dozen of us met on Zoom to support the upcoming Mystery School in Europe, happening August 21st through August 25th, our yearly gathering. Save the dates. The early bird tickets are now available. We gather as revolutionaries and as outrageous lovers. And the link to the Mystery School is in the chat box now. Studying and practicing Eros is a great way to prepare for Eros Mystery School. So do join our next sacred study group. We've moved the date ahead by 2 weeks, so we now start on Saturday, February 4th. Email Jamie Long for more details. We warmly welcome you into a journey of mastery into the Dharma of Eros. And our great library book, Glory to the Heroes, the first 4 weeks of the Russia-Ukraine war. For the sake of value and the arousal of the West beyond moral equivalence by Dr. Mark Goffney and with Elena Maslovo Levine is now on Amazon as an ebook. Do download the book for yourself and your friends, and do take the time to write a review on Amazon. What to expect today? First, a Dharma recap from myself from last week's One Mountain, Many Paths. Then Dr. Mark Offney will set our intention. Then David Aitan will resonate our evolutionary love code. Then we step into our evolutionary sermon with Dr. Goffney, and then we move into meditation to enter prayer. Krista Josepha invites us deeper into community, and to close, we bring people on for our goodbyes and a short dance party. We consciously decide we won't forcefully try to end exactly at a certain time, but promise fullness and explosion, to let magic evolve, to serve the evolutionary process. And we will do our best to end around 11 a.m. Pacific time. Of course, if you need to leave early, please do. And we look forward to being with you next week, and do catch the replay. I welcome all who are new. We need you. If this is your first time, these teachings do stand on their own, and every week's teaching does build on the previous week. For instance, we're in the third week of our Avatar Sense-Making Dharma. We encourage you to listen to previous episodes. You will hear unique language. Trust the magic ways the language or Dharma comes through your understanding. One Mountain, Many Paths is radically committed to telling the new universe story. Now for my recap from last week. Cosmo-erotic humanism. Visions of the intergalactic Homo Amor. Avatar as an interspecies love story. We are talking about texts of public culture, the two movies, Avatar 1 and Avatar 2. Through this sense-making methodology, we are articulating the possibilities that are in the imagination of public culture that actually need to be articulated, because often the new story of value comes not only from philosophers or spiritual teachers, but from the intuitive voices across public culture, whether it be science fiction, the arts, poetry, the shamanic practices, the realms of healing, or the text of public culture as they appear in the cinematic form. What is the story beneath the story? What is the hidden narrative? What's the subtle play that is so easily missed when we look only at the surface? Avatar. We need to see the evolution of its characters. Love is to see. The story of Avatar is a story of an interbeing love story. It's a love story between the Na'vi and the human. A most important scene in Avatar 2 is when Miles Quattridge grabs Jake Sully and Neytri's daughter, and Spider, who's Quattridge's son, but wasn't raised by Quattridge, has grown up as a kind of brother to this young daughter that Quattridge is holding. Spider risks his life, runs in and says, "Don't hurt her." He gets it. Spider is the universe, a love story. Spider is cosmo-erotic humanism. He holds the new complexity that cosmos is the largest frame, the ability to actually see beneath the ethno-human or the ethno-Na'vi, as in the case of Avatar, and to actually see each other as we really are. Can we take the mask off and know that that which unites us is so much greater than that which divides us? And that which we live in is a cosmo-erotic universe, and that Eros moves through all of us. Will we actually reach for a better possibility, which is the universe, a love story, cosmoerotic humanism, the notion that our human experience of love participates in a larger galactic reality, and that actually reality is Eros, that love is not a social construction, that love is not something that lives only between a particular species, that we actually can love each other across species. Whether we're heading not that long from now towards a world of intergalactic war, or we're heading towards a world of an intergalactic homo amor, it actually depends precisely on our capacity to articulate this vision. A band of outrageous lovers committed to evolve the source code, the story in which reality lives and from which reality generates in response to the meta crisis. A love story in which Eros is actually the thread that brings us together. To hold shared meaning structures and interiority across the boundaries of species, to create fields of Eros across species. Can we see each other beyond labels, beyond boundaries, beyond all the obfuscations, and actually see clearly? That's what Avatar is about. Whatever the intention was of the framers doesn't matter. That's what's at play. Can we see each other? Can we see ourselves? Can we participate together intergalactically in the evolution of love? Now, I invite us to more deeply enter the holy and the sacred spaces of one mountain, many paths. And I turn my word to you, Dr. Mark Goffney.
Oh my God, and let me just check in for a second, everyone. And just for everyone to know, we start at 1:45, whatever your time zone is in the world, where Krista opens up the field with a beautiful set of chants and then with silence. And so I just want to invite everyone to be there for that kind of beautiful beginning, number one. Number two, I'm going to just do a check with the team. Am I okay in terms of background? I think we're fine. And in terms of the house, my house, by the way, I apologize, everyone, is filled with workers and equipment and tools. We located a new place for the center, and the center is now the think tank located in an old Victorian. It was an old broken down Victorian in a beautiful remote corner of the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont. It's a beautiful old 125 years old. And of course, the center was able to get it very inexpensively because it's in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and it's freezing and it's this old broken down place. So we've got some workers around fixing it up just so it's kind of livable and beautiful, and it just got covered with bookshelves. And now there's all sorts of tools downstairs, the place that I usually sit, which is why I'm sitting upstairs, which is why I'm doing this check-in. So are we okay in that, everybody? We good? So I'll just check in the chat box with everyone. Right, so sorry for the informality, but we're okay. You can hear me okay? And we're good. Okay, so let me just check that. I'm gonna look in the chat box now for a second. We're good. So Suzanne, okay, we're good. Okay, we're good. Fantastic. Okay, and we're about to get to the code with David. Okay. So I just want to say one thing. I'm so crazy excited to be with everyone today. I'm just so privileged, to be with you today. And I want to just say a word about what we're doing here, and then we're going to dive in. So I've gotten a lot of pressure from different people, and they've said, just turn this into a regular podcast because, you'll increase the numbers and, participate in the podcast world. And that's beautiful. And there is reason to start a kind of regular classical podcast, and maybe we'll do that at some point. And I apologize, Jacqueline, for moving the screen. I'll try not to move it again. But we didn't want to make this into a podcast. This is something else. We're trying to do something else. We're actually meeting each other in the space and feeling each other. And this is the heart throb of what we call the revolution. And we call it the revolution, not in a trite way, not in a sloganeering way, more like as at key moments in history, revolutionaries would see around the corner and realize that the old order as it was could not hold. And we need to actually create a new order. Now that requirement is more true at this moment in history than at any other moment. This new order needs to include the best of everything that came before it, but also to transcend it into a new possibility. As I have been privileged, ecstatically trembling to share with you many times, take a look at Joseph Tainter's book about how civilizations rise and fall. It's a very, very important book. Joseph Tainter, Tainter. And one of the things that Tainter and many other writers point out is that all civilizations have fallen. They've fallen because of the stories that they lived in were, in some sense, stories based on rivalrous conflict, governed by win-lose metrics. It was always us against them. And then the us against them stories always infiltrated the kingdom itself. So even when the kingdom was very powerful, it was the kingdom against other people. So at a time of war, you kind of had clarity. We knew who the good guys and the bad guys were. But then when the war was over, for example, in the United States, when the war with the Soviet Union in its classical sense of the Cold War was over in the late 80s, starting with Gorbachev and then into the 90s, and when America realized it had won the Cold War, there was no longer anything to bring the United States together. And so the United States began to be enormously polarized. The same thing's true. You know the word polarized, everyone from around the world? Split, polarization. The same thing happened in Europe. As NATO realized that the old Soviet Union wasn't a threat in the way that they thought that it was, so the internal divisions, the rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics of every country, right, began to explode again. And polarization began to define the landscape. So what's happened with every civilization is interior polarization weakened the civilization. The lack of a shared story of value within the civilization weakened it, and the civilization fell, right? We now have a global civilization. We haven't created a shared story of value. We haven't solved the generator functions. You with me, everyone? We haven't solved the generator functions that caused all civilizations to fall. We now have a global civilization. That global civilization is demarcated by exponential technologies. Does everyone get this? Has exponential technologies, extraction models depleting the earth of resources that it took billions of years to create, and depleting our core energy resources, which we're burning through right now, which is going to lead to a civilizational collapse. The only way we can avoid that collapse is through a genuine global coordination. We have to coordinate. Now, to ordinate means we look in the same direction, we coordinate. To ordinate, we need shared ordinating values or shared first values and first principles. And you can't create global coordination without what we call, and we've said this before many times, and I want this to, if I can, if this is okay, to literally become part of our lexicon. We can put this into reality together, right? So say this with me, right? Because we've all talked about this before. Margie, it's great to see you, right? We can't have global coordination without global, someone's write the next word for me in the chat box, without global resonance. So see, we can't have global coordination without global resonance. We can't have global resonance, which means we resonate with each other like instruments resonate in a symphony. We can't have global resonance, and see if we can catch this in the chat box. See if we can catch this. We can't have global coordination. Shati, Claire, Krista, where are you guys? Where is everybody? Taheli, right? Let's find each other in the chat box. We can't have global coordination without global resonance. We can't have global resonance, right, without global coherence. Okay, global coherence. Stay with me. Let's stay with me. Let's stay together. Global coherence means we have coherence together, right? We form a larger whole. We can't have global coherence without what? Global intimacy. Can't have global coherence without global intimacy. And we can't have global intimacy, which means a sense of shared identity, without a shared story of value. Okay, without a universal grammar of value. That's what One Mountain's about. That's the revolution. So as we see each other, Merritt and Colin, it's great to see you. As we see each other, right, in the alleyways and in the marketplaces, and we see each other online and offline, we look at each other and we say revolution. And revolution means, right, the single most important revolution is to actually evolve the source code. And we evolve the source code by articulating a new story of value. And let this be ours together, that integrates. Give me the next sentence, anyone? That integrates the best of the traditional, the best of the validated traditional value structures, the best of the modern validated insights, and the best of the postmodern validated insights. So for example, someone like my friend Jordan Peterson, who's doing a lot of podcasting these days, Jordan says postmodernity is evil. Jordan, that's a mistake. Right? No, postmodernity is not evil. Postmodernity's got some things right and some things wrong. So there are validated insights in the traditional world, which is called pre-modern. There's validated insights in modernity, and there's validated insights in postmodernity. Does that make sense, everyone? We integrate those together, and we create, for the first time, a new story of value. And I've been talking about this for, oh my God, 15 years. My beloved friend, Barbara. Peter Goodman, it's so good to see you. I've missed you. I just saw Peter in the chat box. Peter, it's so good to see you. I've been talking about this for the last 10, 15 years. My beloved friend, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who co-founded with me this evolutionary One Mountain, Many Paths, talked about it for 40 years. It's unimaginably important, this new story. And I often we'll talk about it, and there'll be people in One Mountain who then share it in articles that they write. And we've done everything we can to put this notion of a new story into the world. But a new story doesn't mean, stay close, everyone. It doesn't mean a made up story. It doesn't mean, oh, I made up a new story. Let's declare a new story. It means doing the hard work of integrating the validated insights of the traditional world and the modern world, the postmodern world, into a new story of value that becomes a universal grammar of value that then raises all boats. Now go with me to the next sentence. We're doing this together. This is not a podcast where we're talking at you. We're doing this together. This is the revolution. So what's my next sentence? You tell me the next sentence. Yes, what's the next sentence? What's the next sentence I'm going to say? I'm going to say, and that's what we mean when we say, right, that we're at this moment of neurocultural plasticity. Let's get that word. Neurocultural plasticity. We're at this moment of neurocultural plasticity, meaning plasticity means, no, not near cultural, neurocultural. Got it? Neurocultural plasticity, which means just like the brain is plastic. So if you lose part of one hemisphere, for example, of the left brain, then the right brain will pick up and begin to learn in a new way those capacities. That's called plasticity in the brain. And it's something that we didn't understand 60, 70 years ago. It's the last decades of brain research. And Meserinich did very important work in this. So when I talk about neurocultural plasticity, what I mean is there's a certain moment in which culture's plastic, when we don't have a clear story. There's no clear story of value. And at that moment, that's what we're calling a time between worlds. This is a time between worlds, meaning the old stories of value we realize are not quite valid. They don't quite hold. The stories from 100 years ago, free technology, free social media, free infotech, they don't quite hold. The old stories of the religions don't quite hold. The ethnocentric, the homophobic, the anti-body, don't quite hold. So we need a new story of value. The new story hasn't been born, right? So that we're calling that a time between worlds and a time between stories. So I want to just own this together. Let's own this together, friends. We're in a time between worlds and a time between stories. That's what we call neurocultural plasticity. Neurocultural plasticity. So we're doing this together. We are the revolution. We're at the heart of the revolution. We're telling this story, and we're telling a new piece of the story every week together. And what am I going to say? What's my next sentence? You tell me the next sentence. Well, I'm going to compare this to a particular earlier time in history. What am I about to compare this to? Give me the next sentence. Anybody in the chat box, give me the next sentence. The Renaissance. This is exactly what the Renaissance was. It was a time between worlds and a time between stories. And what's my next sentence? I'm going to say in the Renaissance, we were swept with and challenged by the Black Death, by a pandemic that swept Europe. They had no idea how to meet it. We had no idea what to do, right? Jennifer, welcome, right? And so in responding to the Black Death, what Da Vinci and Ficino and his cohorts, right, understood is we have to actually tell a new story of value. We can't get to every village in Europe. The Black Death destroyed between a third to half of Europe and a huge part of Asia, killed everyone, died horrifically, brutally in the streets. They understood we have to tell a new story, and that new story is the story of, that new story was the story of, give it to me in the chat box. That new story was the story of modernity. That new story was the story of modernity. Right, let's listen with our hearts and listen with our bodies. That new story was the story of modernity. Now stay with me, stay with me. Did they get this? Did they get the story right? Did they get the story right? They got part of it right. They got part of it right, okay? The part they got right birthed what I'm gonna call the dignities of modernity. The great dignities of modernity, that's Habermas's phrase, Jürgen Habermas. The dignities of modernity, the new way of information gathering, universal human rights. Stay with us in the center, everybody, stay with us. But they got lots of the story wrong, and part of what they got wrong in the story is they actually deconstructed the source of value. That value is real, they lost track of that. That uniqueness is real, they lost track of. That the good, the true, and the beautiful are real, they lost track of. And what they did is they kind of ignored that. They lost the basis for the good, the true, and the beautiful. The basis used to be divine revelation, God told us. But God told us was owned by every religion, and they realized that every religion had overreached and overclaimed, and that revelation was often mediated through cultural categories and wasn't fully accurate, so they threw out revelation, but they weren't able to establish a new basis for value, right? But they said, you know what? David Hume said, we're going to ignore that issue. We'll just assume that that value is real. And they said about value in one famous document, they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Founding document of the American Revolution. We hold these truths. Taheli, stay with me. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Stay with me, everyone. Stay with me. Stay with me. We hold these truths to be self-evident. What did that mean? It means we don't really have a basis for value, but we just take that as a given. So what modernity did is it took out a loan. Stay close, everybody. So you can get this. It becomes yours, not mine. This is our revolution. By saying we hold these truths to be self-evident, they were talking about value, right? They're talking about value. We hold it to be self-evident, meaning what they really meant was we don't really know what the basis is, but we just take it as a given. So they took out a loan from the traditional world. Did you get that, everybody? They took out a loan of social capital from the traditional world. They said, we're just going to assume that value is real, but they never worked it out. And then gradually, value began to collapse. The universe story began to collapse. The belief that the good, the true, and the beautiful was real began to collapse. The belief that love is real began to collapse. 2 weeks ago, not last week, the week before, when we started our Avatar series, I shared with you that I had gone to the OpenAI program and asked it, is love real? And it basically said no. And I said, is value real? And it said no. This is OpenAI, the new program, GPT-3, the new OpenAI program, which is the new Oracle. It said no. So what do you do if you grow up in a world in which value is not real? In which all you have is programmed social media run by companies whose interest is not yours, whose interest is to keep you on a program for as long as they can in order to extract financial value from you. And we live in that immersive environment called an internet, and we don't have, right, a source of value, and we don't have a universe story, and we don't have a story of human identity, and we don't have a story of desire, and we don't have a narrative of power. You have a failure of frameworks, a collapse. And when that happens, as the great poet said, the center does not hold. We become the hollow men and the stuffed men. Gesture without form. The center does not hold. You have a collapse at the very center of society because you no longer have eros. You no longer have a reality in which value is real. And so you have this lingering sense of emptiness. The most famous shows all over the world become survivor shows where people are thrown together on an island and the truth of who they really are is revealed. At least that's what television is saying. Everyone's competing with everyone. All you have is rivalrous conflict and win-lose metrics. All you have is a success story, which generates a world in which everyone's against everyone else. You have no intimacy. You have no shared story of value. You have a complete collapse at the very center. And that's the source of existential risk. The source of existential risk, all the risks, the 15 risks to the planet that exist today that we've talked about many times, every single one of them is based at its root on this failure of intimacy, which itself is based on a failure of a shared story of value, which then generates only one story, a success story, in which every country competes against every other country. Within every country, everyone competes against each other. Within every company, every division competes against each other. People in a relationship are competing against each other. Am I getting my needs met? Am I not getting my needs met? It's me against you. We've got lists. And we no longer live in a world in which we're in devotion to the shared vision. We no longer know what's the shared story in which that which unites us is greater than that which divides us. That's the revolution. So the reason I spend this time today, friends, with permission, this revolution is not mine, it's ours. That's why we're not doing a classical podcast. We're doing it so we can come together every week and we can create this revolution together, literally podcast by podcast or one mountain by one mountain. Okay, now one more thing with permission. We've created this beautiful book that Elena, right, did such beautiful work on, that Krista did so much work in bringing together. And it's about the Ukraine-Russian war, but it's not really about the Ukraine-Russian war. It's not really about the Ukraine-Russian war. It's really about what, Benjamin, stay with us all the way in the center where we're going now. It's not about the Ukraine-Russian war. It's called the first 4 weeks of the war. And we use that as a model to talk about values. So I want to really invite everyone to get the book, right, and to write a review of it. But it's not to find out what's going on in Ukraine, Russia. A lot has changed since we wrote that book. We didn't write the book with the intention to talk about Ukraine and Russia. We used it as a model, right, to talk about, right, where we are and what does it mean to have a shared story of value and why that's so critical in politics. So I just want to just invite everyone, right, to kind of get that, pick it up, write a review. And then thank you to Krista, to Elena, to our partnership for doing such a gorgeous job. Okay. Oh my God, ready? So we're going to turn to David now. David's going to resonate the code. And then we're going to go into week 3 of Avatar. Okay, we're going to go into week 3 of Avatar. Here we go. David, welcome everyone. Take us inside. Revolution.
Revolution, Dr. Mark, thank you. Welcome everyone. Here we are about to resonate the code, which is really, it's the lightning rod. It's part of telling this new story of the evolution of love. And we're telling the story, and then we go out into our lives every day and embody it. And I noticed that in myself. I hear the whispers of the new story throughout my day as I interact with friends and family, and actually it opens my heart. It gives me an opportunity to practice. So here's our code for today. Evolutionary love is not merely an emotion. It is a perception. The evolutionary lover sees with God's eyes. Because love is a perception at its core, a perception that generates emotion, there's great hope in love. The universe sees, and the universe sees love. The universe feels, and the universe feels love. Seeing generates feeling, and feeling generates seeing. But we must start with perception, because perception can be trained through practice. Personal human love is a unique self-perception. Personal self-love is a perception of one's own unique self. However, one cannot be an evolutionary lover with these forms of perception alone. Evolutionary love requires a perception of the entire evolutionary process and our place within it. I'll go ahead and resonate it one more time, because this is the new story, evolution of love here. Evolutionary love is not merely an emotion, it is a perception. The evolutionary lover sees with God's eyes. Because love is a perception at its core, a perception that generates a feeling, an emotion, there is great hope in love. The universe sees, and the universe sees love. The universe feels, and the universe feels love. Seeing generates feeling, and feeling generates seeing. But we must start with perception, because perception can be trained through practice. Personal human love is a unique self-perception. Personal self-love is a perception of one's own unique self, one's own unique expression of the evolutionary impulse. However, one cannot be an evolutionary lover with these forms of perception alone. Evolutionary love requires a perception of the entire evolutionary process and our place within it. With that, I will turn my word to you, beloved Dr. Mark.
Thank you, David. Wonderful, gorgeous, fantastic. So we're going to go right into this code. Okay, this is week 3. Madly delighted to be with you, and thank you. We're going to look at a clip from a compilation of scenes from Avatar 1 and 2. It's going to be about 1 minute and 40 seconds. We might then see a couple of those scenes a little bit later slowly, but let's look carefully at this set of scenes. Okay, we ready, everybody? Take us inside 1 minute and 39 seconds, which is the compilation of the clips. It's clip 9, compilation scene. Those were the ICU scenes from Avatar 2. We're going to go into what those are. Play me the ICU scenes from Avatar 1. Okay, and we're going to put them together. Okay, give me the ICU scenes from Avatar 1. With us, everyone? So the line is ICU. They were hard to see because Avatar 2 is not easily available. So we had to, I don't know where we got it from online, but they're not good scenes. They're hard to see. So I'm going to explain what they are. But first, take me in, right, brothers and sisters, take me into the Avatar ICU scenes from Avatar 1. Are we good on that, team?
This is a very important. It's good he's back on board, but he thinks I'm a scoundrel. It's not just I'm seeing you in front of me. It's I see into.
Okay, that's one. That's the first ICU scene where Norm is explaining to people why ICU is the big line, right, in the Na'vi people. Give me the next clip. Next one. I want all the ICU scenes from Avatar 1. Let's see them together.
I see you.
I see you.
One more scene. The third ICU scene when Atiri speaks to Jake and says, I see you, before he speaks to the Na'vi tribe.
I see you.
Okay, let's come together, friends. So first, just because we're home together, I asked for the wrong scene. I asked for clip 9, which is the wrong clip to ask for. Let me explain you what we just saw. So we saw first, clip 9 that I asked for was 3 scenes from Avatar 2, and then we saw scenes from Avatar 1. Let me explain the 6 scenes we just saw. They're unbelievable. Okay, I see you. Let's see each other. And I'm going to add 1 scene before. Okay, we're not going to see it. I'm just going to describe it to you. So Miles Quaritch, here we go. Everybody ready? Can we have a drum roll? We got a drum roll. We ready to go, everybody? We're going to take these 6 scenes we just saw. We're going to explain them one by one. You don't need to remember them, right? Drum roll. Here we go. Okay. So Miles Quaritch says, Miles Quaritch is the Colonel who appears in Avatar 1. He also appears in Avatar 2, already in an Avatar body because he's been killed at the end of Avatar 1, and his memories have been downloaded into an Avatar body, and he's been charged with hunting down and killing Jake Sully. That's our plot line. Now, in Avatar 1, and if you haven't been with us and haven't seen the movie, I want to just bring everyone in just for a second. So Avatar 1 is the story about planet Earth, which is in desperate need for minerals. Those minerals live on Pandora, which is another planet in the galaxy. You with me? The key mineral is called unobtainium, meaning it's not obtainable, which is not by accident. And Earth, which is more powerful technologically, goes to this other planet in the galaxy to extract their minerals essentially against their will. We're going to do 1 more week of Avatar after this week, and I'm going to show you some of the scenes that they took out of Avatar that were made and never used, and kind of how we got to the situation on Pandora. They're very important scenes, but essentially there's this battle between the Na'vi people who live on Pandora and Earth. And Earth is coming, the human beings, to essentially extract resources. And the Na'vi people, to them, are much like animals are to human beings on planet Earth today. Does everyone get that? So we use animals for our own means, but we don't view animals as being fully human because animals aren't. But we actually overreach. It's not just animals aren't human, animals are animals, and they do deserve their dignity, right? But we actually turn animals into objects. We cause them torture and suffering on planet Earth today. We work with animals in factory farms, right? We create enormous suffering for animals because animals exist to serve us. So this human capacity to treat animals as animals, but in the negative way, right? Meaning as animals, meaning not with their own dignity. Humans then take the same capacity and apply it, this time not to animals, but to other species who are actually equally intelligent to humans. They're not technologically advanced, but they're equally intelligent and actually in many ways much more evolved. That's the Na'vi people. That's just the backdrop in case, just to honor anyone who just came in and hasn't seen any of the Avatar movies, that's the context. Within this context, and now I'm going to assume that people have some knowledge of what's going on here. Let me just dive in. Within this context, there's a scientist named Grace, and there's Miles Quaritch, the Colonel. The Colonel, his job is to actually make sure that they can get all the minerals out that they need. And if he needs to massacre Na'vi people in order to do it, that's what he's going to do. Think about King Leopold of Belgium, a Western democracy, but just 100 years ago, Leopold of Belgium, this is one example, goes to the Congo because they need rubber and other minerals from the Congo, and they massacre, destroy, and butcher the people in the Congo to get those minerals. That happened tragically time and again. So this is now planet Earth replaying that Belgian scene of King Leopold, but King Leopold of Belgium is now the Colonel Miles Quatrich. Everyone get that? That's the scene. Jake Scully begins as a drunk soldier. He has his legs destroyed in a combat mission. He winds up replacing his brother who's died in this Avatar project. And Miles Quatrich says, you be my agent, you get to know the Na'vi people, tell me what their weaknesses are, so when the time comes, we can take them out and destroy them so we can get our minerals. That's the story. Grace then says, and I don't have time to show you the scene now, but Grace then says, Dr. Grace, she's the doctor who's researching the Na'vi, and she actually feels and knows that the Na'vi have enormous depth and enormous culture and an enormous heart and enormous capacity. And we talked about that last week and the week before, that they're plugged in, that every Avatar person, right? Every Na'vi person actually participates in the field of knowing, and all of the trees and all of nature and all of the values and all of the knowledge that lives within the earth and that lives within the Na'vi. They're exchanging it all the time. It's this field of gnosis, and it's this field of goodness, truth, and beauty, and this field of value that actually the Na'vi participate in. Grace knows that. So Grace says to Jake, everyone stay close. Grace says to Jake, don't listen to Miles Quatrich, see what they see. Does everyone get this line? If we can catch this line and put it in the chat box, that would be great. See, she says to him, see what they see. And maybe next week we'll be able to look at that scene together. See what they see. Does everyone get that? See what they see, meaning learn how to see. And that's the evolutionary love code we just put in. Let's put the evolutionary love code in the chat box. Love is a perception. See what they see. See what they see. And so all through Avatar 1, the way to say I love you is I see you. Because there's this understanding that love's not merely, and we're going to talk about this, love's not merely an emotion, that love is a perception. We're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes. But first, I want to go through the scenes. The way that they say I love you is I see you, because they have this deep understanding, which is at the core of our evolutionary love code, that love is not merely an emotion, energy and motion. Love means that I can see you. I see your value. I see your unique value. I see your beauty. I see your goodness, truth, and beauty. I see you. I see through the outside. I see who you are. So I love you. That's our evolutionary love code, means I see you. And there's 6 scenes that we saw. The first scene that we saw, well, I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to go first the scenes of Avatar 1, which we saw second, which was my fault. I asked for the wrong clip. So in Avatar 1, we see the first clip is Norm. It's a little 20-second clip. Norm explains to Jake, Norm is a scientist who works on the team together with Grace. Norm says to Jake, this thing I see you, what they mean by that is I see into you. I see your beauty. I see your value. So Norm's explaining to Jake what I see you means. That's number 1. Number 2, there's another clip. That's the second clip that we saw from Avatar 1, when Jake, who Neytiri is the son of the chieftains, right? The man and woman who are the heads of the Na'vi tribe. Neytiri is their daughter, this beautiful Na'vi woman. And Neytiri has only seen Jake in his avatar body. She's never seen his human body. The way that it works, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, is that the human being goes into a particular chamber in which you merge your consciousness with an avatar body, and then you are actually able to walk. Your consciousness actually animates. You walk in that avatar body. And so Neytiri has never seen Jake the human. And Miles Quatrich, in this last battle at the end of Avatar 1, goes to pull the plug on the chamber that Jake's in so that he can kill him, because he'll be in his avatar body, he'll be thrown out of his chamber where he's breathing, and he'll suffocate because he can't access air, because the human being can't breathe the air of Pandora. So the human being needs to be in an avatar body to breathe on Pandora, or needs to be wearing a certain kind of mask. Okay, so Jake is thrown out of his chamber. Neytiri saves him and sees him for the first time literally, but not just literally. She actually sees Jake in his human body. And what she says is, I see you. What she means by I see you is, I don't need your avatar body or your human body. I see your essence. I see your unique self. I see your soul. I see your beauty. I see your goodness. I see your truth. I see you. That's the second I see you scene. The third I see you scene, which we saw from Avatar 1, is when Jake, it's at the 2/3 into Avatar 1, in which the human beings are about to attack and try and destroy the Na'vi people. Jake arrives, right, riding on this mountain dragon beast called Taruk Makto, which only the great warriors of Na'vi are able to ride. Jake is able to find Taruk Makto, this bird in the sky, ride Taruk Makto into the Na'vi camp. By riding Taruk Makto, they have confidence that he's actually with them. And Neytiri is blown away. She thought that Jake had betrayed her people. She now realizes she didn't see him. And before he's about to give this major speech as a leader to her tribe, Neytiri says to Jake, I see you. And Jake says to Neytiri, I see you. And it means, I love you, but I love you not just as a feeling. I see you. I see who you are. I see who you truly are. Then, stay with me, it's very beautiful. This carries through Avatar 2. This carries through Avatar 2, and it's crazy beautiful. So in Avatar 2, there are actually 3 scenes. I'm just going to do each one in 20 seconds. So Spider in Avatar 2 is the son of Miles Quatrich, who's been killed, the colonel. Spider, his son, is a little baby when Miles is killed. Most of the people from Earth are sent off of Pandora, and they're sent back to Earth. But Spider is too young, he's too fragile to make the trip. So he stays in Pandora, and he's raised essentially as one of Jake and Neytiri's children. We'll talk about that more next week. But he's completely loyal to the Na'vi. He gets the Na'vi ways. At the same time, his biological father is Miles Quatrich, the colonel. Now remember, the colonel's memories have been downloaded into an avatar body after Miles Quatrich is killed, and we open up Avatar 2, realizing that Miles Quatrich is now in an avatar body. And next week, we're going to talk about that. You get how paradoxical that is, because Miles Quatrich thinks that the Na'vi, the avatar bodies are Na'vi bodies. The Pandoran people in Na'vi, the avatar bodies are Na'vi bodies that can breathe Pandoran air. But of course, Miles Quatrich thinks that the Na'vi are subhuman, and all of a sudden he's an avatar body. So what that means and how that affects Miles Quatrich, we'll talk about next week. But for now, Spider, who is Miles Quatrich's son, is now confronted with this Miles Quatrich in an avatar body who still is a bad man. And yet, there begins to be something of a relationship between them. The team of Miles Quatrich and their avatar bodies take Spider captive at a certain point. But Miles Quatrich in his avatar body, it's not really Miles Quatrich, it's his memories downloaded in the avatar body, right? Something opens in his heart, and he takes Spider with him on their mission. And Spider doesn't help them, he hates them. But even though they're the enemy, he begins to get to know Miles Quatrich in his avatar body, and he begins to see his bravery. He begins to see something beautiful in him. And there's a particular moment in Avatar 2, and there's a scene like this also in Avatar 1 when Jake gets his Indra. Indra is the mountain beast, the mountain animal that you learn to ride. It's kind of like riding a wild horse, right, in a Western rodeo. So on Pandora, you have to get your mount, your Indra, which is your mountain bird. And it's very hard to do. And there's a beautiful scene in Avatar 1, which is Jake getting his Indra. We should actually compare those scenes at some point, but not today. And then in Avatar 2, Spider explains to Miles Quatrich in the Avatar body what this process is of getting your Indra. And then he watches Miles Quatrich in his Avatar body very courageously tame his Indra and create this bond with this mountain bird beast. And there's this moment in which Spider says to Miles Quatrich in the Avatar body, he says, I see you. Meaning for a moment, he's not the enemy. There's a moment when the enemy is no longer the enemy, and I can actually see you for a second. That's very deep. It's very profound. Sam Keen wrote a book called The Faces of the Enemy, and he pointed out that in all propaganda posters, the face of the enemy is blanked out. You actually don't see the face. And he did an entire book, maybe 25 years ago, called The Faces of the Enemy. It must be on Amazon, which is about the notion that you never actually see the enemy. The enemy doesn't have a face. So here's this moment in which Spider, who's totally loyal to the Na'vi, he's been raised by Jake and Neytiri. Nonetheless, for a moment, Miles Quatrich in the Avatar body stops being the enemy and he says, I see you. That's the first scene we saw from Avatar 2 when Miles is riding his Ikran, that Spider, says to him, okay, I see you. And he teaches him how to say, I see you in the Na'vi language. The second clip we saw, I'm just going to do two more. The second clip we saw is when Lo'ak, let me just introduce this character. Lo'ak in Avatar 2 is, anyone in the chat box, Lo'ak in Avatar 2 is Jake and Neytiri's second son. And the first son, the older son of Jake and Neytiri, he's the model son, the apple of his father's eye. But his father, Jake, doesn't really understand Lo'ak. So Lo'ak is the renegade. And Lo'ak plays a very important role in all of Avatar 2, which I don't have time to go into. But basically, let's just understand that Jake, Lo'ak's father, is always disappointed with Lo'ak. And Lo'ak feels like his father doesn't understand him and doesn't see him, meaning doesn't love him. And there's a certain moment at the end of the movie in which Lo'ak saves Jake. And Lo'ak actually is the one who's able to make friends in Avatar 2 with the Tulkun. And the Tulkun are the great sea beasts, but these great sea beasts are not beasts. They're actually more evolved than the humans. They do complex mathematics and philosophy and music, and they have great love stories. They're far more advanced, far more evolved than humans. And Lo'ak, Jake's son, can actually see the Tulkun. He understands who they are. And there's particularly one Tulkun, one great sea animal, one great sea whale animal that the other Tulkuns don't understand. And Jake actually sees this ostracized Tulkun and makes friends with this ostracized Tulkun. And there's this love story essentially between Lo'ak, Jake and Neytiri's son, and this ostracized, banished, exiled Tulkun. And out of the love between Lo'ak, Jake's son, and this Tulkun then aids Jake and Neytiri at a critical moment in their battle against the humans that actually turns the tide of the battle. So in essence, what Lo'ak is saying to this Tulkun, this sea whale that's been thrown out by the other sea whales that misunderstand this particular Tulkun, he's saying, I see you. And at the end of the movie, when Lo'ak saves his father, Jake, rescues him, all of a sudden, Jake gets who his son is, and he turns to his son and he says, I see you. And finally, the very last scene that we saw was when Syria, and Syria is, right, this young girl who says to Lo'ak again, I see you. That's the other scene that we saw. Tell you who Syria is. Syria is the daughter of Tonawari and Ronal. And Tonawari and Ronal are the head of the water people. They're called the Metkayina. The Metkayina are the water people, and Natiri's tribe, the Navi, are the Omatikaya. Right? The Omatikaya. So when Jake and Natiri want to escape the humans who are hunting them, they're from the Omatikaya, they're forest people. They go to ask for shelter, for refuge with the water people, the Metkayina, and the daughter of the Metkayina, this beautiful, beautiful girl, Syria, she sees Loach. And even though the water people and the forest people are different, and actually there's a great clash between the sons, Anang, the son of Tonawari and Ronal, who are the chieftains of the water people. Anang, their son, almost has Loach killed because of the competition, because he can't see him. But Syria can actually see him. Syria sees him and she says, I get who you are. I see you. So she's able to see through the fact that he's from the forest people and see his heart. So I see you always means I love you. I see you means I love you. So I'm going to ask everyone, if you can, to actually close your eyes for a second. I'm going to turn off for 1 second my video and to see if we can actually see with our inner eye for a second. And we're just going to talk just for 3 minutes before we finish about what this means. I love you. I see you. Because we're at this moment in which we're about to step into an intergalactic world. We're going to step beyond the human world. We're going to step into an intergalactic world. 50 years ago, when we first started getting sightings of extraterrestrials, we thought that they might be real, and there was a real conversation in culture. And then culture stopped the conversation. It was too dangerous to the materialist paradigm of science. The notion that there were actually other tribes, other people's life all through the galaxy became a crazy idea. When I was growing up, if you talked about UFOs, you were crazy. That was a fringe phenomena. But actually, in all of the great traditions, there was always a knowing in the great religions of a broader sense of life all through the galaxy. So from the lineage that I grew up in, that was a given, that there actually were interactions between the galaxies. And there's actually a text in the book of Genesis, which talks about lovemaking between the daughters of men and the sons of gods who fell to the earth. And there's many sources. And I mentioned last week that my friend Sean Hargens has done work on this from his perspective, right? And the beautiful work he's doing about the exo world. And I grew up in the lineages that talked about the intergalactic love story. And together with my beautiful partner, Zach Stein, we're talking about homo amor as an expression, not of a universal love story. It's not just the universal love story, it's the cosmos love story, which is why we call the new story of value cosmoerotic humanism, cosmoerotic. It's an intergalactic love story. But this is critical because we have two choices before us. As we expand into the new world, either there's going to be intergalactic war. Think about Star Wars, which is science fiction portraying intergalactic war, or we're going to realize that the force of Eros actually animates all of cosmos, and that actually we can see each other. We can actually, in a world that's filled with life, and in the last 5 years, the realization that the world is filled with life has actually entered mainstream culture. The New York Times has run 12 stories. Mainstream presses all over the world are running stories about the genuine reality or genuine possibility of the reality, the best explanation we have for the data of there being a world, not just this world, but galaxies teeming with life. And the amount of data is actually unbelievable, it's undeniable, and it's entered the mainstream if you actually follow these kind of things. The last 5 years, there's been a major shift. So we're preparing for a galactic world. The galaxy's a love story. And if you think that's ridiculous, that means you're not following the data. That means you're lost in superstition. The empirical data very clearly points in that direction. So we need to create a world in which the human beings model not ethno-humanist racism, not humanity as ethnocentric, but actually we need to see beyond ethnocentric. We need to be able to see each other. Jake and Neytiri can look at each other in this intergalactic love story. And it's all about intergalactic love stories. Take a look at the movie called Starman with Jeff Bridges, 1984. It's an intergalactic love story. Take a look at the movie called Michael, I believe it's called, right? Produced by Sean Daniels, right? It's a beautiful movie. It's an intergalactic love story. There's a key Star Trek, which is the story of Spock and Kirk when they're young and how they meet and how their children meet. And if you read the story carefully, it tells the story of Spock's father who marries a human, and it's an intergalactic love story. And last week we asked everyone, if you can, take a look at all the literature and send us examples that you found of an intergalactic love story. Because to be cosmocentric means that human beings on the one hand turn to the animal world and say, oh, there's love between humans and animals. Doesn't mean that humans and animals are the same. Doesn't mean humans aren't more evolved than animals. They are. And yet, take a look at the movie My Octopus Teacher, which is about how human beings and animals can actually love each other in a very particular way. We don't marry each other, right? It's not about sexuality, but it's about love between those two worlds. But human beings and other species, human beings and Pandorans, actually, wow, they do make love. And actually the Jeff Bridges story, Starman, actually is Jeff Bridges, who is an alien, quote unquote, right, comes to Earth, and this beautiful love story and this beautiful lovemaking scene on a train, which births their son who will become a teacher. So we need to begin to think about this intergalactic love story. And to do that, we need to be able to say to each other, I see you. I love you, I see you. So I just want to do 2 minutes with you now, if you can. We're in the revolution now. We're in the revolution. And let's just understand, what does this mean? I love you, I see you. So let's think about it deeply together. What does it mean, right, to love? Right? Let's feel deeply, right? To love is to see through God's eyes. That's what it means to love. And to love God is to allow God or source or infinity to see through your eyes. Right? To love God is to allow God to see with your eyes, to uniquely see what can be seen from your perspective, with your unique depth and your unique qualities. From that place, you say, I see you. That's what it means to love God. Self-love is to see yourself, to know your own nature, to see your own unique self. And self-love is enlightenment. And the nature of the universe is that it evolves. Life forms differentiate from earlier life forms and evolve an ever-increasing order of complexity and consciousness. And we know that complexity and consciousness are intimately related. They're the inside and the outside of the same evolutionary folding. And the more complex the physical organism, the more evolved are the inner capacities of consciousness of that same being. Right? A rabbit is more materially complex and more conscious than a snail. A human being is more materially complex and conscious than a dog, right? And so each original form provides original being with a unique experience of itself. Let me say that again. Each original form provides original being, God, source, with a new unique experience of itself. Because each original form can see in a new way, right? So an amoeba serves the divine with a particular experience of itself. A butterfly with another, a fish with yet another. A bird and a horse provide yet another experience in which the divine sees or experiences itself. But the human being is a quantum leap forward in consciousness. The human being, a complete human being, actually is a place in which actually the universe wakes up in this complete human being in this new way. Because when the human being loves, The human being is actually seeing consciously in a new way through God's eyes. That's what it means to love. To be a lover is to see through God's eyes. And when you see through God's eyes, then God can see through you. Wow. This requires you to shift perspective from that of your separate self-ego to your infinitely expansive, unique self. To love God is to let God see through your eyes. And the truth of love is that you can only love God or another human being through your eyes, your unique self, which are the eyes of God. And it's this realization that you have a unique perspective, a unique way of seeing, a unique I see you, that obligates you to cleanse your doors of perception and let God see through your eyes, because only you can open that particular love in the world. You see with and as the eyes of God only if you clarify the pettiness of your small self and you uncoil the self-contraction of the ego. It's only thus that God can see through the prism of your unique eyes. And that's why we're obligated, responsible. It's our great wild joy to clarify our doors of perception. Because any lack of wholeness on our part, any blindness on our part, any blurring in your unique perspective and perception obstructs the vision of God. If you cannot see clearly, you literally blind God. So your job, my job, is to become a unique self, a clarified unique self. Our job is to make ourselves so transparent to the divine, so open to the love intelligence that sees through us, that God can see with our eyes. This is our gift to God. Because at the core, last step, my friends, this is the revolution. We're laying it down together, friends, heart open. Love at its core is not an emotion. Love at its core is to say, and we're going to see the song in a second, I can see clearly now. Love at its core is not an emotion. Love is a perception. Love is the ultimate verb. Love is not a noun. Love is a faculty of perception that allows you to see the inner nature of all that is. To love another human being is to see their true nature. To love is to perceive, to see the infinite specialness in divine beauty of the beloved, whether they're from the Na'vi people, whether it's the Starman of Jeff Bridges, whether it's any other intergalactic love story. We need to lay the ground of the intergalactic love story that's coming. To be a lover is to see beyond the limited and distorted vision of your separate self-contraction or of your human contraction. Miles Quattridge, the Colonel in Avatar 1, has a human contraction. He can't see. But to be a lover is to see with God's eyes. And the notion when we say God is infinity, infinity is all the galaxies. That's why the great religions actually understood, of course the galaxy is teeming with life, because the galaxy is infinite divinity. It's the infinity of divine intimacy. How could it not be teeming with life? So to be a lover is to see with God's eyes. Your beloved is both your lover and all that is. And to be loved by another human being is to have your true nature seen. And your true nature is your unique self. Whether you're Neytiri, right? Or you're Spider, right? Or you're Jake, or you're Loak, or you're Anang, or you're Tonawari, or you're Ronal, or you're Selfridge, or you're Miles Quattridge. Right? To be loved by a human being is your unique self is seen. Let's go one last step, my friends. To love God is to let God see through your eyes. To love God is to empower God with the vision of your unique perspective. And we live out of a passion for the divine. And the divine says, let me see through your eyes. Remember, Grace says to Jake, see what they see. Infinity says, there's a way where I can see through you. Let me see through your eyes. We're called to see with God's eyes, and God says, I want to see through your eyes. We want to act with God's eyes, to react with God's eyes, to write your book of life with God's eyes as God would see from your perspective. And if you're successful in your life, success is not win-lose metrics. It's not rivalrous conflict. Success means that your perspective becomes available to God. Your perspective, you're seeing, finds God and feeds God. It gives God strength and joy. And you must consider, my friends, we must consider together that being in devotion is nothing but actually being God from a distinct perspective. Oh my God, there's no true individuality which is independent from the context of union. Mature individuality, to be a unique self, is not about being separate. Unique is not separate. To be a unique self is about having a distinct way of seeing in the context of union with the divine. And to be responsible for this perspective, for the seeing, is to declare the truth from this vantage point. But without making it the only perspective, I declare the truth from my point of seeing, but I don't make it the only point of seeing. I'm not attached to my point of seeing. I know the truth of my point of seeing, but I can actually take your perspective and I can feel you and you can feel me. And we move beyond polarization. That's what it means to be a lover. To be a lover is to see with God's eyes. To love God is to let God see with your eyes. That's it, my friends. To be a lover is to see with God's eyes. And to love God is to let God see through your eyes. And I know that my screen's a little blurry now because the sun came out, which is okay. It's beautiful. Can you feel that, my friends? This is what we're doing. This Dharma is the revolution. I can see clearly now. So Chris is going to take us home, but let's go into a prayer now. And we're going to do a unique prayer this week. This is the code that David read. Evolutionary love is not merely an emotion, it's a perception. The evolutionary lover sees with God's eyes because love is a perception at its core. Okay, so that means that to come awake is to say, I can see clearly now. So the prayer we're going to do this week is the song, I Can See Clearly Now. That's our song. And as we play the song, I'm going to ask if we can, that we pray together. And we pray for the ability to see each other, to see ourselves, for humanity to actually embody homo amor, cosmocentric love, that we begin to set the tone for a memory of the future, which is an intergalactic love story, where we look at every species and we look at each other. Between nations, between every human being, no one's a stranger. No one on planet Earth is a stranger, and no one in the galaxy is a stranger. We begin to articulate cosmo-erotic humanism, an intergalactic love story. So take us inside. I can see clearly now.
Thank us all for being here. And what a joy it is to be in this band of outrageous lovers where we get to say, I see you all the time. And by seeing each other, we are awakening this unique self in each other all the time. And I can just say you that is delicious. So if you are yearning to be seen more or to see more, I want to invite you to step in to this community even closer. And you can do that by becoming a member of One Mountain, Many Paths. And as a member, you get access to our 9 beautiful self-study courses, but also many places where we meet during the week. One of them is the weekly Evolutionary Love Code writing group happening with Christina every Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. European time. So you are very welcome to join us there and to see each other there. I also want to say, like I said already, as a member, you get access to all the courses. One of those courses is God is Eros, and that is the Outrageous Love Festival course in 2014 that we did with Dr. Mark Gaffney. And it is about the phenomenology of Eros. Well, it wasn't called that yet in that time. It's about the 7 tastes of sexing. And this is actually also the topic of this year's Eros Mystery School, where we will be gathering together for 5 days in Belgium, in a beautiful castle in Europe. Imagine being together in this Dharma, immersed in the goodness of this Dharma for 5 beautiful days. I really want to encourage you to take a look at what this means at the website erosmysteryschool.com. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at info@erosmysteryschool.com. I'd be happy to meet you, to talk to you, to get to know you, and hopefully see you very soon on the path. We close here every week with a little revolutionary dance party. So we'll be playing a song, and you will be invited to turn your camera on by promoting as panelists. If you click OK, you can turn your camera on. Please put everyone on gallery view so we can see each other's beautiful faces, and we'll dance this beautiful day out, and we'll see each other on the other side. Thank you so, so much.